Okay, I guess we're live. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? I'm looking here to see if any comments appear on the Facebook page. Where do those comments show up? It looks the same to me as it did before. Well, I'll let you guys figure that out. Hi, I'm here to talk about Workerized JavaScript in AMP. My name is Ben Morse. I'm a developer advocate at Google. My job there is to work on the web, help the web be faster and easier to use for developers and also for people that use the web. I also used to be a full-time musician. This is true. And happy Ramadan and good evening. I'm over here in the US near New York in New Jersey, where it's rainy today and it's noon. And I'm really sorry we can't be there with you in person. At least we can be here together virtually. I'm also joined by my colleague Andrew, who will be answering questions on the chat as we go through this.
Hi, everybody. My name is
So
Andrew.
one,
Sorry.
hi Andrew, how's it going?
Nice to meet everybody. Thanks.
So unfortunately, we couldn't do our planned AMP roadshow to Pakistan. Saad and I had planned this in March to go to Karachi, Islamabad, and to Lahore, and to visit you all and meet with you all there. We had a great visit back in October of last year, but the virus thing happened. We had to hold up. Hope you're all staying safe over there. Over here, we're kind of in the world's epicenter, I think, of cases near New York, but I'm fortunate that I'm safe over here. I'm in a good spot. I hope you're all staying safe as well. So our topic today is to discuss JavaScript and web workers and how we can do that. So we're going to talk about a few different things here. So the topic here would be Workerized JavaScript in AMP, which was my planned topic for Google I/O, which also was canceled, unfortunately. This actually is the first time I'm giving you this content, anybody in the world, so I'm glad that I'm getting a chance to do it. So our first thing we're going to discuss is JavaScript and web workers, what workers are, why do this in the first place, why it's useful. Secondly, we'll be discussing AMP, what AMP is, and then how you can actually use Workerized JavaScript in AMP, of course. And then we'll be actually doing a live coding example from a tutorial we've just published, I think yesterday. So this is a brand new tutorial about how to use Workerized JavaScript in AMP. If you have questions, please put those questions on the chat. We can answer those questions for you live. I don't see the chat still, though, so maybe Saad or Andrew, if you know where the chat is, let me know. My first ever Facebook Live, I don't see the chat anywhere. Let me know if you can. Anyway, so the first topic we have here is Workerized JavaScript. Why do this? What's the point? Well, the point is that the web is still too slow. If you've been, watching any talks on performance for the last 5 or 10 years, or following any Google from Chrome team talking about these things, this is a problem. If you've got a phone with very fast connections all the time, like always 4G connections or very fast 3G connections, if you've got a modern iPhone or Pixel or a super nice phone, it may not be as much of a problem most of the time. But for most people, it's still a problem. People often have access to 3G or 2G connections. A lot of phones are not that fast. They take a long time to process things. And then when they load your site, instead of seeing your content, they might see this for quite a while, maybe even 5 seconds, maybe even 10 seconds. In some cases, the sites never load at all. So performance is a problem. You want to make it better. From last is that the average mobile web page took 12 seconds to load on a 3G connection. 12 seconds is kind of a long time on 3G. If it's 2G, it might be 30 seconds or a minute. Again, not always a problem, but a problem frequently enough that performance really has to get better. And not only that, but actually 40% of connections worldwide were 2G connections. So again, a problem we want to fix. One problem is JavaScript. Another problem is large images. There's other problems like CSS, other things that are inefficient. But a lot of JavaScript is bound to make your site slow. This actually is a screenshot that I took yesterday from a site owned by Google. This is a site that Google runs. It's a pretty complicated site, so the JavaScript might be necessary. But notice there at the bottom, we're seeing 2.5 megabytes of JavaScript. That's also minified and also compressed. Looks like about 7.5 megabytes of JavaScript uncompressed. That's a lot of JavaScript. And phones take a while to load these things. And then also once they're loaded, it takes a while to parse them if your phone is especially lower powered. Executing takes a lot of time. This can make your site really slow. One solution, of course, is simply ship less JavaScript. That will solve your problem to a large extent. There are ways to do that. Of course, if you have code that isn't being used, get rid of that code. If you're using WordPress or something, using a lot of plugins, check for plugins with a lot of JavaScript. Try not to use those plugins. Try to make things faster in general that way. If you're bundling your code using React, Angular, or something else, you can reduce your bundle size, make sure dependencies that are unnecessary aren't being included. Of course, minifying, compressing, those basic kinds of tools also help. Also, if you can do this, this is more sophisticated. Google Apps try to do this. If you're using JavaScript on your site, only if certain interactions occur, then load that JavaScript only when it's needed, not immediately. And then, of course, using AMP is a way to use less JavaScript, which we'll also be discussing, as you can imagine, in some detail. If you have questions, please put those things in the chat and we'll answer these questions as we go or during breaks over here. So another problem, though, is that JavaScript is single-threaded. The browser in general has one thread. Unlike most things you use today, your desktop computer, phone apps, and so on and so forth, it's just got one thread. The problem here is that JavaScript can block whatever you want to do. Not only can it block other JavaScript, but it can block the entire browser. So for example, if you're loading a lot of JavaScript and executing a lot of stuff, and the user does something on the screen, clicks on something, taps on something, then the JavaScript which actually handles that can't execute. It has to wait until your other JavaScript actually is executed. So this may cause delays. And worse yet, the entire browser is waiting for your JavaScript. So the browser can't be doing animations, can't be painting the screen if your JavaScript is running. So it can really block everything. So another goal that we have is to have less JavaScript on the main thread. The problem is that all JavaScript runs in the single thread. So how do you do that? Well, web workers are a way you can do this. What are web workers? They've been around for actually a long time, I think around 10 years. They're supported in all major modern browsers, although I think some versions of IE don't support web workers. They've been around for a long time, and they allow you to do multi-threaded JavaScript. But they're used pretty rarely. Why is that? Because they're limited. Web workers are designed to be used for kind of long tasks that don't involve what the user actually is seeing. It's for long computations, those kinds of things. Here's an example of how it works over here. You can see that you make a worker from your JavaScript and you can do things to it and you can send messages. So the worker communicates with the main thread of JavaScript in two ways. The main thread can send it messages, which can be any JavaScript object, and the worker then does its work and then sends back messages, which also contain objects. So the worker gets messages from the main thread and sends messages back to the main thread. It can't do anything else but just those two things. Its communication is limited, and thus it's kind of harder to use web workers for most things JavaScript does these days. There are ways to make this a little easier. Surma has made a library called Comlink that makes it easier to pass messages back and forth and makes it feel a little more like actors. It makes it a little easier to use workers in a more natural way. There's also a thing called WorkerDom out there, which makes it possible to circumvent one of the biggest problems with workers. They can't access the DOM directly. Again, workers just can talk to the main thread via messages. They have no access to the actual document object or the DOM itself. What WorkerDom does is something pretty sophisticated. It passes messages back and forth from the main thread. So when the DOM changes, the web worker gets informed about that, and the web worker has a virtual DOM, which contains a copy of the real DOM. So again, when something happens in the actual DOM, then the worker DOM will pass a message to the web worker, which will then update the virtual DOM. And then the worker itself can modify this virtual DOM. When it modifies the virtual DOM, a message gets passed back to the main thread. So worker DOM essentially keeps a virtual DOM and the real DOM in sync. And the worker can make changes to the DOM. It doesn't even know that it's in a virtual DOM. It uses the usual DOM APIs to make changes. It's kind of neat, kind of useful, and it can be used for all kinds of interesting things. The thing is, of course, this is pretty complicated. This already is a lot of stuff. So how do you deal with all these things here? You don't want to spend your time writing all the framework you need to do to use web workers and to use WorkerDom and all these things. So there's an easier way, which is to use AMP. Part two of our talk, AMP. Have you encountered AMP before? You may have. You may not have seen it before on the web and not know what it is. So for those to whom AMP is new, I'll give you a brief discussion about what AMP is. AMP essentially is a way to make the web faster for users and faster for developers to make sites. It's really web components. What AMP does is adds the HTML, the tags HTML probably should have, but doesn't have. Because HTML, as you know, was designed many, many years ago, I think around 30 years ago now, for document description. It was when the web didn't have things like images even, let alone things like interactive menus, embedding videos, image carousels where you slide images around the screen, interactive graphs and things. Those things didn't exist. So these kinds of interactive features were not and are still not part of HTML. What AMP does is adds these features into HTML by using web components. And it looks kind of like this, a simple example of AMP. To embed a YouTube video, for example, you no longer embed YouTube's JavaScript in AMP. AMP actually, in general, doesn't allow you to write your own JavaScript at all. I'll tell you why in a minute, but this looks like this. So you give it a layout like responsive, for example, and AMP will automatically make this responsive so that its container of the video shrinks and grows as the container shrinks and grows. Sorry, saying that better, the video will shrink and grow as its container shrinks and grows. AMP does all that stuff for you. You set the width and the height also, and then you give it an ID of the video, and AMP does the rest for you behind the scenes. So why width and a height? Because AMP also aims to make things better for users. It wants to make things faster for users by restricting the amount of JavaScript you can have, by restricting your CSS to 75K, and by making you follow certain kinds of limitations. You can't have things like ads that are intrusive on the screen, only non-intrusive ads. It does various things to improve the user experience, which I'll discuss in a minute. One thing it also does is it wants to make the layout of the screen stable. So one problem on the web, you're on your phone looking at a news article, trying to look at some content, and suddenly an image pops up and things all shift around. Or an ad pops up and starts showing you all this stuff or playing a video and everything moves around. It can occur sometimes 7 or 8 times while a page is loading. This makes the page unstable and reduces user trust. It makes it just kind of annoying. AMP, to solve this problem, makes you declare the size of all things in advance. So it leaves space for everything. So in this case over here, the YouTube video has a space allocated for it on the screen. When YouTube loads up, it will just pop that video right into that space. So it makes it not intrusive. I think I just described all these things just now a minute ago, but let's go over these things quickly. Things AMP does to improve the user experience is things that are slow or discouraged are not allowed. So excessive CSS is not allowed. Most custom JavaScript is not allowed, except for in certain cases, as we're about to discuss. It makes sure that content doesn't jump around as things load. So it makes space for everything in advance so things don't jump around. Ads that are distracting, that take over the whole screen, that move around the screen, that make things crazy are not allowed. And it also tries to lazy load components so that as you're scrolling up towards things, they get loaded then, not immediately. So images, videos, other kinds of components get loaded as they're needed, not before. The goal being to make things faster and to make things more stable for the user. Again, if you have questions, please add those things to the chat. And Saad and Andrew, let me know how to find the chat. I haven't seen it yet. Oh, there's the chat. Oh, thank you. Look at this. I see the chat. This is great. Oh, there's Comlink. Thank you for that. And WorkerDom. Okay, this chat is really useful. I'm glad I finally discovered where it was. All right, so there's all those things that AMP does. And AMP gives you a bonus over here. AMP also has the concept of valid AMP pages. If you follow the rules AMP sets out to make pages that are fast and good for users, you get this bonus. Google is always out there. Google's web spiders are always out there looking out there for AMP pages. If Google's web spiders find an AMP page, they will stick that AMP page into Google's own AMP cache. So your HTML gets cached where it gets optimized further, and then it gets special treatment in Google search. It doesn't get a benefit in ranking, but there are a couple of benefits that you get. One is you can see over here on the screen, this thing in the middle that's called the AMP news carousel. All the articles there from the Atlantic, Los Angeles Times, and my country over here, these are all articles that are AMP. And then if you look below there, you'll see that other article about tax cuts from Bloomberg, again, things from my country over here. there's a little badge there, a little lightning bolt symbol indicating that that's an AMP article. Furthermore, in certain cases, your AMP page will get preloaded in the background in an iframe because AMP can control what get loaded and when. Google search knows it's okay to preload the page. It won't break any privacy restrictions. It won't load any images, load other things, or execute JavaScript. It can't do those things. It can actually preload most of the content. And then when you tap on that, it appears almost immediately. So it can cut the time to load a page, even on very slow connections, to less than a second. It kind of solves that problem of speed and tries to solve other kinds of problems for you as well as a developer. Microsoft also does this. Here's a screenshot from Bing. You can see Bing has a similar AMP carousel and other kinds of features. Now you should know that Google Search is changing in the near future to give these benefits to non-AMP pages that also are AMP-like. So pretty soon, in a little while, not quite yet, but pretty soon, non-AMP pages that are fast, have stable layout, can get the same treatment. But it's still hard to do these things by yourself. AMP is still the simplest way to make things that are fast and have a stable layout. But if AMP is a problem for you, pretty soon you'll get the same benefits without using AMP at all. So AMP was designed for publishers to use to make these mobile pages that were faster. So the way you did it is you had a desktop page that was more complicated. If you were a publisher, a newspaper, a TV station, whatever, you then had a mobile page that was made in AMP. You had these two pages with the same content made in different kinds of formats. But AMP has changed quite a bit since then. It's gotten more sophisticated. It's been used for all kinds of applications beyond publishing. For example, e-commerce, AliExpress's mobile site has been partially AMP for a while. I think for the last 2 years or so. Here's a product page from AMP's mobile site, amp.aliexpress.com. I took a little screenshot here. You can see HTML, AMP version, all these things there on the bottom. This actually is an AMP page. They use a mix on their site of AMP pages and non-AMP pages. This is a pretty common approach, by the way, to mix AMP with non-AMP things. So when AMP was created, it didn't really allow JavaScript at all, except for in very small ways in quotes in this kind of binding mechanism called AMP bind. Well, AMP is changing now. Last year, it started to embrace JavaScript. People always wanted to do this, but didn't know how to do it safely because the fear was if AMP allowed JavaScript, you could then write your own JavaScript, load more JavaScript, load lots of tags, analytics, load lots of things yourself, suddenly start doing a lot of things, block the main thread, and break AMP's performance guarantees. So instead, AMP has a way to do this that preserves AMP's performance guarantees, which, as we know, bringing our whole talk together, workers and AMP and JavaScript, involves workerized JavaScript in AMP using a component that's called AMP script, which again came out just last year. Very exciting. And how does this work? Looking back at the chat over here, a RoboAmp. Hi, Roberto. I know who you are. All right. AMP script is the component. And how does it work? It uses the WorkerDom library in AMP itself. So if you want to use WorkerDom, the easiest way to use it is to use it within AMP. It has limitations on it, so you don't really break AMP's performance guarantees. You can have 150K of JavaScript, no more than that, so you don't make the page load very slowly. And also things that are intrusive are restricted. So what this basically means is AMP script will control a certain part of the screen. If that size of the screen is fixed and it can't change, AMP trusts you to make all the changes you want to change. So a certain part of the screen belongs to you. Go ahead and do whatever you want to do there. That's fine. If your container can change size, taking over the whole screen or changing the layout, AMP only allows changes after a user action or certain other cases. So if the user clicks on a button somewhere, we figure that you want to make changes. The user knows you want to make changes. Whatever you want to do is fine. And here's an example of how AMP script looks, a very simple hello world example. See how this looks over here? Like all things in AMP script is a component. Here it is at the top of the screen. We're saying layout equals fixed because we want to have a screen area that's fixed to allow AMP to allow us to do lots of things without restrictions. We specify a JavaScript file in this case called myscript.js, so at the bottom of the screen. And myscript.js is pretty straightforward. It finds a button on your screen and adds an event listener so that when the button is clicked, we'll add the words hello world to the document body. Sophisticated stuff, but there it is, hello world. And over here is actually what document body is for AMP script. The AMP script doesn't receive the entire document in its virtual DOM. The virtual DOM AMP script uses consists of the stuff inside AMP script. So the AMP script will control part of your page, not the entire page. That's a lot of stuff. Any questions on all those things? If you have questions, please drop those things into the chat or comments about Workerized JavaScript, about AMP script, about AMP, or about anything else. Sports. All right, thanks for the positive comments. If you have negative comments, those are also welcome, although less so. So that's what AMP script is. And AMP script can't do the entire DOM because the DOM API is very, very big. There's hundreds and hundreds of methods and properties in the DOM API, and reproducing all of those things in AMP scripts or WorkerDom's own JavaScript would mean it would be huge. What they've done instead is implemented the most commonly used APIs, things like get element by ID, things like that. There's a little table over here on WorkerDom's GitHub site, things like name, value, basic things like that are used. Other things like namespace, URI that aren't used as much are not implemented. So you can't just copy any JavaScript you want to right there into AMP script and have it just work out of the box. It probably isn't going to work. You've got to use certain DOM APIs. So that's a little bit of a challenge when you first use AMP script. But the good thing is, if you're using React or Preact, WorkerDom was designed to implement the APIs that those things use. So if you're wrapping all your code in React or Preact, then it should work out of the box. There are the ways to do things. So now, having gone through all of those things, we'll do a little bit of live coding. This is exciting for me because this is a brand new tutorial that we just published yesterday. I'm going to show this very briefly here on the screen. Here it is. If you want to do this yourself, you can, along with me. You're welcome to try this with me. I'll show you how to do it. If you go to this link over here, go.amp.dev/learn-script, this will get you to this page over here, and you can do it. And here's how it looks. Here's what we're going to be doing. And there we go. You could do this on your own IDE and your own web server, or you can use Glitch also. Glitch is a pretty handy online coding solution. I'll be using Glitch today because I know that I can do this and you can see what I'm doing. You even can go to this Glitch URL over here as I'm doing it and see how it's going, and you can root me on over here. So 1 second, I'm just gonna do a couple of things over here real quick. Okay, I'm gonna drag this back over here so it isn't a distraction. And there we go. So with Glitch, the way you start a project is by starting a new project, or you can copy your current project and go and do what's called remixing it. And that will then give you your own copy of that project. It's gonna get smaller for a second over here. You can see this button at the bottom saying remix this. That's pretty small. I'm gonna make that bigger again so we can see what's going on over here. How big can it get? Just that big. Okay, that's what we're gonna do. So my first task here is to remix this so we can get our own copy of it. So now it's making a new version. One fun thing with Glitch is the names here are easy to remember because it gives you these interesting 2 or 3 word names like Pitch Nebula. Okay, I lied. Hosta is a word I've never heard before in my life. So they're often easy to remember, but it's Hosta for some reason. Pitch Nebula Hosta. So this is what you have over here when you do this project. There's the finished code, which is the answer. We're going to ignore that for now. And the starter code. This over here is an AMP site that already exists, an AMP page, sorry, that's pretty simple, that has a form in it that does a password validation. We actually can show this in a new window. And as we change this, it will actually update it. The problem being we have these things in different directories. It's not going to show us the app immediately. We have to go into starter code, and there it is. So there's our opening page over here, our only page we have. It asks for an email address and a password that's secure. What we'll do is it will check the password against certain rules. You know, those password things where it says use a special character, use 20 characters or more, make sure you have the name of a color in there somewhere. Often they're kind of obscure and irritating. So is ours. So the email address we can use some sort of email address like this, and then our password has to have certain rules. So if I put in some stuff in there, it gives me the rules, which is nice. And then I put in some things there. Notice it can't actually check what I'm doing as I do it because AMP doesn't allow you to do that. What AMP allows you to do is just check the password after it's done. So we're gonna break the rule by having less than 8 characters, try to submit it, and then it gives us an error message over here, which is pretty general. Please match the requested format. Once you actually match the requested format, it will then be happy. So submit, now it's unhappy. We actually have now a capital letter, a number, special character, and then it finally doesn't have the message anymore. Here's how this looks over here on our screen. If you can see this, there's our app page. It's got a bunch of CSS over here, and then the actual page is down here at the bottom. Notice over here, there's a form, not surprisingly, and it's got this password input over here with two special things in it. One is this pattern attribute. This pattern contains a long, obscure regex that defines all the rules we have over here. And then we have this on attribute. This is how AMP does event handlers. So when this input password is tapped, we show the rules. This is not ideal because you can get there by tabbing in there instead or by clicking into it, or sorry, clicking a work. If you get there by tabbing into it, it won't show the rules because the focus event isn't supported by AMP. And then also we have this thing where if you actually get in there by accident by tabbing and then press a key, it shows the rules then. This is not ideal, but it's not so bad really. So there's those two things that make this happen. I think that's the important stuff there. Yes, that is the important stuff. Let's now go and modify this to use AMP script instead and make our own customized experience. Any questions on this so far? Our goal is to take this form over here and put in custom JavaScript to make it happen in our own customized way. Looking at the chat over here, as Andrew's pointing out, AMP script is still being worked on. If there are APIs you want to have supported, or you find a problem of some sort, or have a feature request, put those things in the WorkerDom GitHub repo or in the AMP repo. You can submit a request, and people will look at those things and probably respond pretty quickly. I can just show you that actually, as long as we're talking about it over here. If we go to GitHub, here's GitHub's AMP site over here. This is an open source project AMP. Anybody can contribute or raise issues or make changes. So there's that. And also WorkerDom has its own separate repo over here. And again, you can make requests over here as you want to. There's Chris who did most of the work on WorkerDom, and there's plenty of issues over here that are being handled as we speak. Okay. Thanks for those links there, Andrew, also. So back to this. Our goal is to make the starter code into our finished code. First thing we're going to do is we're going to drag this into the main folder because I want to have it actually be in the main folder instead of the, I guess, the root directory instead of the starter code directory, because then it will automatically update over here. So we're going to just change the name over here. That's how you move directories, by changing the name in glitch by this path. And now this should open up automatically. There it is. And now it'll keep this in sync. If you change things over here, this should also change over there. So if we say, welcome to our amazing site, then that should also appear here. Welcome to our amazing site. That's great. Okay, already we're succeeding here. So next, we're going to make our area for JavaScript. We're going to create a new file over here, which will be called validate.js because we'll validate a password. Setting that in the JS directory, which gets created automatically. There it is. And now we're going to add over here the stuff necessary for AMP script to work. AMP script is a substantial amount of JavaScript. You can see here that in AMP, if you have, if you use certain components, they require their own JavaScript to get loaded because AMP has a minimal set of JavaScript to run AMP. It doesn't include things to run things like forms. So we're going to remove this mustache thing. That's not necessary. We're going to add in instead the stuff for AMP, which I believe will look the same way as this. We're going to copy and paste this and just change it a little bit. So instead of AMP form, it will say custom element is called AMP script. And just change this over here to, whoops, we lost it there. Let's go back over here. AMP script, which also is version 0.1. There's a dash, there we go. So now it will load amp scripts JavaScript, and then we're going to wrap our form inside an amp script component. So remember that amp script can only control the things inside of the component itself. In this case, we're going to control the form. That's it. So we're going to add this amp script over here. We're going to use the validate.js file as our script. The layout equals fixed because remember when the layout is actually fixed and can't change, AMP allows us to do more mutations to the area because it figures that that's not going to change the screen that much. We also have to allow forms to work for security reasons. Must be specified explicitly. And then remember that in AMP, everything has a size required. If the size isn't declared in AMP script, it'll still work, but AMP will know that the size can change. Nothing changes, nothing restricts the size. And so it will restrict what you can do because again, AMP wants to avoid you being able to change the size of the component, making the whole screen bounce around all the time. So we close this over here. Now, hopefully this adds us there. Whoops, we don't really want that there. Uh-oh, hold on, come back. We want to actually just stick this at the bottom, of course. There's that. I'm gonna take this whole form and see if I can do this. There we go, indent it all nicely, and then add the AMP script at the bottom. And there we are. Okay, that seems promising so far. Let's see what's happening next over here. We've done that. We've done the container height, width. Let's see over here what we have. If we do this, there it is. Now, there'll be an error over here you would see if you had the validator going for AMP. There's a, over here, you can see at the top, this little one. This means there's actually an error, AMP validation error. And you can't see that on your screen because it's not sharing that part of it. But I can show that to you if I add, at the end of this, a hash development equals 1. Then AMP will put error messages in the console. And add that over there and open up the console. Console a little bigger. And now we're going to load this again and to show us the error message. There it is. So notice it wants us to have the absolute URL, not relative URL. This is because AMP requires this because AMP also can be used on a cache. If you're using a cache, your domain will change. So it requires absolute URLs. In this case, we're going to skip that. We'll just see this error over here. It'll still work. It just won't pass AMP validation. But that for us is not a big deal at this point. I'm going to close that, let it be, it's fine. So back to our code over here. Let us go over here and, sorry, what am I doing over here? Making sure I'm not missing anything too important. This seems good, okay. We're going to actually now take out some things we don't really want over here. Remember this pattern over here? Don't need that anymore. Remember this long on thing over here, which handles our user actions. We're going to skip that too. No longer needed. And that's good. We're also going to want to add a couple of things here. We're going to want to disable this button here by default so that when the user starts out entering their password is disabled, only enable it if they actually follow the rules. So now that's disabled. Now let's try to add a little bit of a test message and see if our AMP script is working. I'm going to do a console log thing over here. We can say, hello, AMP script. Actually, I think you can do this, can't you? You can format these things. I think it's a C. I could be wrong about this. This could be embarrassing. I think it'll let us make it this way using CSS. Not gonna work. Oh, look at that. There it is. It was actually %C. So it's working. That's exciting. There it is. We have AMP script working over here. Now, where does JavaScript live over here? Where can you find it? It's in a worker. So if you go to sources over here, it's a bit hard to find. It turns out it's actually, make this a little smaller, over here in this long hexadecimal thing in the bottom. That's where we're going to find our AMP script. There it is. Hold on, that's not really it. Where did it go? I thought it was going to be over here. This is an embarrassing moment here. Thank you, live coding, for making this happen. We should be seeing somewhere in here our AMP script, but for some reason we're not seeing it there. Interesting. Well, something else to review maybe later on. Certainly isn't there. Wouldn't be there. Wouldn't be there. I thought it'd be in here. I'm surprised by this. It usually is over here. I'm seeing something else more complicated looking over here for some reason. Maybe Andrew can figure this out for me while I'm doing the other stuff. Usually you can spot it over there and you can set breakpoints and so on, but we can't right now for some reason. We'll load it again just for fun. Will it change anything? Yeah, same thing. Oh well. I don't know what it is. We'll look at that again later and see if it magically gets better. So anyway, here we are over here. Let's add some more JavaScript. So our first goal over here will be to manipulate the things here, manipulate the things. And I see a question over here. Why width and height are required? Width and height are required. Actually, they're not required. You can leave those things out if you want to. It's just that AMP wants those things to be there because AMP wants you to have areas of the screen not change size. If those things are omitted, you can't make changes until the user does something. AMP will restrict what you can do to the area until the user takes an action. So adding a size will make AMP feel happier because it knows it can make the entire screen change size and things change around on the entire screen. So anyway, here we are. Our goal is to do things to this form. We're going to want to do things to the password box. We're going to want to check the contents there to see if they match our rules or not, and change the submit button to enabled. And also we're going to want to show this rules area if something actually changes. So do we have an ID of rules over here? That's good. There's not an ID on this button over here. So let's give that an ID also. Let's call it submit button so we can grab it more easily. And then the rules area has that. And then also let's give an ID to the password box over here. Now let's call it password box. And then let's go over here to JavaScript and start putting these things here in globals. So we're gonna make one for password box. Oops, sorry. One annoyance here is we can't use jQuery anymore. You get used to this after a little while. And there's other ways to make this easier on yourself. I'm gonna just copy this a couple times. Oops, I didn't actually copy it. Let's try this. Let's copy this. Then the submit button. I'm gonna grab that. Do this. And then we're gonna wanna also deal with this rules area. I think it was called rules. Okay. That let's see if this actually worked. So back over here in our console, we should be able to, oh, there they are. Look at this. Okay. Yay. Our AMP script is popping up over here. So I guess AMP script picks some things at the beginning, and then here's our JavaScript over here. Thanks, Andrew, for explaining these things a little better than I'm doing on the chat. If you go back to the console, we should be able to actually look at these things. If I actually type in submit button, look at that, there it is. So that's nice. Even though this isn't a worker, our globals are still visible in the console. That's kind of neat. Let's go back now and make this JavaScript even more exciting. So we're going to also want to change the color of each of these LIs over here as the rules are met. It'll be red if the rules haven't been met and green if they're met. So we're going to give all of these things their own ID to make this easier on ourselves. We'll call this one lower. We'll call this one capital. We'll call this one number. I'm not going to spell it UD. We're going to call this one special because it's the famous special character thing. And we're going to make this one over here 8 for at least 8 characters. There's that. And now we're going to take our regular expression we had before and split it up into the actual rules that we need. I think I just removed the regular expression, unfortunately, so it's gone now. So I'll have to just find it again. Let me just grab it over here real quick from the original tutorial. So this is what it was before. There was this pattern. Come on, let's copy and paste. How hard can this be to do? There we go. There was this pattern over here. We're going to take this pattern and split it up into 5 individual rules to make our lives easier. So we're going to make this map over here that will be for checking everything. We'll call it check regexes because the regexes we'll use to check things. And we're going to use all these patterns here. So lowercase was just A to Z. That's just basic stuff. So let's just do that. Upper was uppercase A and Z. Let's make sure that the slash is there. And then a digit was just the digit character. Do you guys see those things over there? That these are all the individuals, taking all these things here and just sticking them in there. I see actually a bug over here because special character looks like it was actually only not lowercase or digits. So let's actually fix this bug by making it anything which is not either lowercase a to z or uppercase a to z or a digit. Let's make that. There we go. That should be special characters. And then finally, at least 8 characters is this way over here. And we're still getting a little error over there. Oh, because it should be actually any character 8 times. There's that. Your time's running kind of short. I'll do this a little faster probably. We're going to make a function over here that will contain all of our stuff. We're going to pass this function the element that's a password box. It'll give us a closure, so we'll store all these things. We're going to put into this thing a few functions. One is what to do when a check is passed, and 2 is what to do when it fails. So when a check actually passes, we're going to want to turn the li green. So it's going to take an element, and it will remove anything in there that could be invalid class. Sorry. And it's going to add in there valid class. And then when things fail, we'll take an element and do the same kind of stuff, but in reverse. If something fails, we're going to remove anything which is valid and add invalid. We're going to add some CSS so that does something. We're going to go over here back to our main file over here and go to the CSS and add a class for valid. Say color is green or gren. And then if it's invalid, we're going to make the color red. Okay, now back to our JavaScript again. We're going to now make the function that checks the password. This is just going to go through all the rules in our map over there, apply all those rules to the password box. And if a rule is passed, we call it check pass. If a rule fails, we call it check fail. If no rule fails, then everything is passed. Make the submit button enabled and everyone's happy. So first of all, we're going to actually grab the value of the element, which we stored in our closure. And then we're going to assume that fail is false, and then go through all of our regexes up there. Each of those things, we're going to grab the li, a lower upper digit special or 8, as we added before, and just grab that li, and then just run the regex, depending on how you want to pronounce it, against contents of the password field and see what happens. If it matches, we're going to say, hey, matched. Oh, I forgot to do one important thing here. Parentheses, those are always good to have. If it doesn't match though, then we're going to do 2 things. We're going to say fail, so we'll turn it red, and also set failed equals true. And then if it actually does fail, but if it didn't fail, we're going to enable the submit button. We're going to spell better. That I'm seeing an error over here still. What is this about over here? Oh, check regex. Well, actually, because it's plural. There we go. Okay, we're actually almost done over here now. We're just going to do 2 more things in this check for password function. We're going to add our event listeners. Remember before we couldn't use focus? Now we can use focus. So if the user focuses on the rules area, we're going to, whoops, sorry about this. We are going to make it no longer hidden. And then also, if you press a key in there and then the key up event happens, we're going to then call check password and all those things above. Seems good. And finally, when you run this whole JavaScript file, we're gonna run this whole function password box we got above. Okay, so is it gonna work? Let's see what happens over here. Here's our screen. There's our console. Let's make the console go away. All right, suspense. Here we are. We'll put in our username, email rather, hello Pakistan, and then our password. Oh, look at this. It requires a lowercase letter. That's true. So let's give it one of those. Oh, it turned green. And then capital letter. It's not quite working. Hold on, you got a problem of some sort. Oh, look at this. Oh no, class list of null. Ah, what went wrong over here? Where's our class list? Remove, huh, element. We've got some sort of problem. We passed it the password box, that's good. But then something failed over here. So EL seems to not exist. Check pass is being passed. Each LI, do those exist? Lower upper digit special and 8? Running out of time, I realize too. So I'll give this a minute or two to debug. If I can't fix it, then I'll show you the final version. Let's see if we actually have all the things we need over here. Lower upper digit special and 8. Are those? No, I called it capital. Huh, interesting. All right. Lower upper number special and 8. That matches those over here. Let's try it again. Okay. Hopefully reloaded now, blah, 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 whatever. And now password. I'm not seeing any errors anymore, so that's promising. No, it's still a problem over here. Did it reload the page? Because capital, I think, is our problem still. Unless numbers are a problem. Digit. I called it digit over here. What did I call it here? I called it number. I can't believe this. Number. If that works. Often the dumbest mistakes are the most important mistakes. Okay. That looks good. Okay, notice that everything else is turned red. Typing a capital letter. Let's type a capital letter. Ooh, this is good. Okay, type a number. Special character. Okay, let's make this go away so you can see the whole thing. Notice our submit button is still grayed out over here. And at least 8 characters. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Success. We got it to work. So there it is. We have this over here. And that's how you do it. We have some JavaScript. We have an AMP page. And we've done this whole thing off the main thread. Now, of course, this is not a very processor intensive, function here, JavaScript, but AMP just makes sure that your JavaScript is being honest by making it run on a worker. So it's a way to do this. It's an interesting way to actually do Workerized JS that's super easy and doesn't require a lot of extra work. And there's our incredible result. Thank you very much. That was a little stressful. My first time live coding this whole thing here. So after all that, do you have any questions or comments? I'm looking over here in the chat. Roberto asks if they're going to have AMP script and AMP for email. I doubt it. Email is supposed to be pretty restrictive. Running JavaScript of your own in email, even in AMP, would probably be intrusive. So I doubt that will happen. It could happen. I know AMP for email has certain things like AMP bind and AMP form, the basics you need to use to run AMP in email. If you're curious about this, AMP for email is a way to use some interactivity in email. So you can use AMP components to actually load in new content, have someone submit a form to sell like a new price for a product. It's kind of powerful and kind of interesting. It makes email dynamic. Any questions about all these things though? About JavaScript and workers, about AMP? Don't be shy because we're here. We have 10 minutes to answer questions. Andrew, this is true. Uh, AMP also allows you to do a binding mechanism where you have state variables that are stored within AMP state components. You can then do data binding on those and change their value based on user interactions. Also, AMP script can manipulate these state variables as well. That's more of an advanced AMP topic, though. Any questions on other topics? Topics about the world or Google or AMP or JavaScript? If there are no questions, I could have gone more slowly there. What do you think, Saj? Should we call it? Looking over here at our chat. I guess we're done then. In which case, let's go over here to our final slide. This is actually not our final slide. This is the slide before our final slide. Please try this out yourselves if you're interested at go.amp.dev/learn-script. And that's me. If you have further questions later on, find me on Twitter or look for Andrew. And there's my site over there too. Thanks to Saad for setting this up. Thanks to Andrew for helping out with questions and other kinds of things. Happy Ramadan. Oh, hey, Saad. Oh. Saad appeared for a moment and then he was gone. Happy Ramadan. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. Good night. And thanks a lot.